Not yet.
Maybe we sent a link to her specifically, or she might have.
Want me to forward her the big packet?
Got it there. It might be. Yes, text her. No. This is a paper of those, please, so we're waiting to see if anyone could be online.
She just came on.
Yep.
She just did.
She's in the waiting room.
Oh, okay.
We're letting her in right now.
Great, so we will, I'll call the, oh, that's the wrong agenda. We already did that. I'll call to order the Charlottesville Albemarle Metropolitan Planning Organization for our Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024, 4 p.m. Policy Board meeting. We do have a request from Supervisor Malik to participate electronically. Supervisor Malik, if you could just state your location and your reason for participating remotely, please.
I am at home in Earlysville and I'm keeping my germs to myself.
Thank you. There a motion to allow Supervisor Malik to participate.
We just have to have a quorum here,
Correct.
we have 3 out of 5.
We have a quorum. Okay.
We have 4.
I would move for allowing Supervisor Malik to join us remotely.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Great, so Supervisor Malik is now officially in the meeting and allowed to vote and all of those sorts of things. That will take us to item number 1.
Thank you.
And if we could do the roll call, please.
Of course. Supervisor Malik, which we know is here.
Yes, I'm here.
Supervisor Galloway,
Present.
Councilor Pinkston,
Here.
Councilor Oshman,
Here.
and Miss Laundrie as alternate for Mr. Nelson.
Here.
Do you want a roll call of non-voting?
I think it's
Great, thank you.
It's fine. And that will take us to matters from the public. Members of the public are welcome to provide comments on any transportation related topic, including the items listed on this agenda. The limit is 3 minutes per speaker. For those who are in person, they'll come up to the podium here and you'll have your time to speak. And then if we have anybody on the line that wishes to speak, we may need you to just notate that by a raised hand so staff will know to permit you. We'll allow the in-person folks to go first just to help manage that piece. And then just to remind that public comment is something where you make all your comments to the board. It is not a back and forth. We'll do our best to collect questions because I know we'll have some topics today on the reclassification. And then there is an additional matter for the public at the end. So we'll do our best to field all the questions that come up and then to deal with it when it gets to the item in question, which would be item 4 for that particular topic. And then we'll see how it goes. All right, so are there folks here who wish to give public comment in the room? There are 3 folks. So we'll just start on the right and we'll go kind of down the list, and Mr. Krebs, you get to conclude the in-person. And then we just ask that you state your name and where you live, for the public. For the record, so.
Mr. Chairman, I make one point of order sort of first. That's out of 3 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, I went to the TJPDC homepage today, right before the meeting, and there's no listing of this meeting. And then if you click on calendar, it takes you to another calendar, and there's no listing of this meeting. And it seems like it'd be really great to address that calendar deficiency.
We'll take a look at it, because
Thank
you
you.
know it is accessible online, because we got folks.
Oh, it's definitely accessible, but
Folks are there,
you have to know how to find it. It takes a long time.
but we got your point on that.
Thank you. So in 1988, the Woolen Mills neighborhood began to ask for traffic calming measures.
And I'm sorry, sir, could you?
Oh, my name is Bill Emery,
Thank you.
and I live at 1604 East Market Street, and I'm speaking to the FFC item.
Yes, sir.
36 years later, we continue to ask. Our local neighborhood pathways existed prior to the invention of the automobile. If they are now federally functionally classified as collector roads, that designation will weigh against the neighborhood's use of the commons for the next 100 years. There's a stark difference between applying labels and thoughtful planning. Longtime Route 20 commuters know Freebridge Lane is a shortcut between Route 20 and Charlottesville. In the past, hundreds of drivers daily turn right on Elk Drive, turn left on Freebridge Lane, turned right on 250 and entered Charlottesville. November 1st, Freebridge Lane will begin a one-year trial as a space for people. That is planning. Consider the counterfactual. Freebridge Lane is still in use. It's carrying 3,000 vehicles per day. It's proposed to be labeled as a minor collector. County elected officials and staff make assurances to residents and property owners that the classification doesn't mean much of anything, that perhaps the collector designation will be a positive for the VDOT paving schedule funding or possible grants. That is applying a label. Responding quantitatively to the inappropriate use of local neighborhood streets and applying a label doesn't benefit anyone. It masks the issues at play. A qualitative response is needed, a thoughtful response, not a spreadsheet, not a road to hell paved with professional credentials and automatic advice. So I ask you to listen to the people who have invested their lives in this neighborhood. I ask that you experience the ground truth, walk the streets. I ask that you examine the merits and deficiencies of this FFC process as applied to Chesapeake and Market and as not applied to Broadway. If approved today, the collector designation will paper over and further pile on to an existing problem. The Woolen Mills doesn't have an HOA or a neighborhood association, and our city councilors are at large. This petition, I walked around with sheets of paper and the 99% signed. Please hear us. Please respond clearly to the questions citizens have submitted via email. Vote for 25 of the 27 FFC reclassifications proposed today. As you know, this is a decennial process. After the public's questions have been answered, after meditation and contemplation, vote on the Market and Chesapeake classifications in the spring. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Cox. I live at 311 Fairway Avenue, close to Market Street, Chesapeake Street. I've lived there for 27 years. Every single day for those 27 years, I have either walked or driven on those streets. I know those streets well, and they are neighborhood streets. That's what they are. They are not connectors of any kind. They may periodically serve a few drivers as that function, but by design, they are neighborhood streets, and that design should remain. I'm very concerned about this because we've been promised that, oh, the change in designation is only being done to get more money from the federal and state governments. It won't really matter, and the change won't affect the design of those streets. Just the other day, over here on Elliott, a person living there requested a marked crosswalk across Elliott at 2nd, a block from where that terrible accident happened a month ago. That request was denied by city staff, and in the explanation, it was noted that road is classified as an arterial street. Arterial street. It's not arterial street, it's Elliott Avenue. And arterial is a much higher use than Elliott sees, but he used that classification to deny the installation of a critical, needed marked crosswalk at a dangerous but legal crossing that people use every day. So don't make promises that you can't keep and tell me that change in designation isn't going to affect design. Never say never. Okay, now I have a real big problem, and that is because for transportation planners who are sort of separated from the community or whatever, you look at a map and you see downtown and you see this straight line that goes right to the interstate at Shadwell. And that straight line goes down Market Street and across the Rivanna River. That is going to be a perennial problem. Every time it's a natural route, and people are going to see it and say, that's where we need a second bridge to divert the flow from Free Bridge. So this is going to come up. I don't trust this because I really do fear that this is the beginning, setting the stage for that future. So please reconsider the impact of that designation on the city and on the people who live in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs.
Good evening, I'm Peter Krebs from the Piedmont Environmental Council. I have two quick announcements to share. One is that we're hosting a community Halloween themed costumed bike ride this Sunday at Ix Art Park. That starts at 4 o'clock. Show up, we'll have a little contest for the best costume with tricked out bike, and it'll be a fun way to experience the roads and do a little street level intelligence, as these folks have talked about. And then the other thing I think is of quite a bit of interest. So a number of the people in this room participated in the walk audit that we organized with the Charlottesville Area Alliance, AARP and America Walks back in May. It was a great experience. And now AARP Alliance, the Charlottesville Area Alliance and America Walks are back with a series of locally focused webinars about walk audits and walkability and the intersection of transportation planning, walkability, and equity. So those webinars are going to be held at noon on Wednesdays, starting a week from today. So that first one will be on October 20th, and there'll be a panel discussion, and I'll be one of the speakers on that panel. That session is called Walk Audits Demonstrating the Need for Accessibility and Equity. Then there'll be additional webinars the following, and then culminating on November 20th with an hour-and-a-half webinar. So I have flyers over there at the table where Gretchen's seated, sitting, and yeah, so I encourage everybody to stop by. Those of you who are online who would like the details about that, just email me. I'm easily accessible. My name is Peter Krebs. That's Krebs. My email address is pkrebs@pecba.org. So I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully at the bike ride and certainly at the webinar next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone online who wishes to give public comment by raise of hand? All right, seeing none. I know we received some emails. We did receive one that requested we read it into the meeting. So it's a short email. I'm happy to read that into the meeting. It is received from Judy Marie Johnson. And she says, I, decades-long resident, 1702 East Market, asked the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission MPO Policy Board to refrain from requesting 43% of the Woolen Mills neighborhood's local streets, Chesapeake and Market streets in France, by federally functionally reclassified as minor collector streets. Judy Marie Johnson, she's attending, or she's driving, so she couldn't get online to say that. I would think in the spirit of just transparency, if other board members have received emails, if you note that a staff person with TJP's here, the MPO is not included on the email, we can just forward that to either Christine or Ruth, and we can have that as made part of the record, because we received a handful of emails as well. Right? I don't think we received more than a handful. Specifically to the MPO policy board?
No, not specifically to the board, to staff, to VDOT staff, city staff,
I'm
PDC staff.
sending the email sent directly.
To the policy
to
board.
Policy board.
That makes sense. Thank you.
We just may have to do a little work on our part to do that. All right, so that will bring us to a close public comment. The next item is general administration. We need to review and accept the agenda, and then we will submit minutes. Are there any changes we need to make to today's agenda? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
All right,
So
it has been made and seconded. If all in favor will please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And there you go, thank you. The agenda is approved, and then we have the draft August 28, 2024 meeting minutes. Are there any additions or additions that need to be made to those minutes?
I have a correction of spelling. John Faltz's last name under the public comment is Pfaltz.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other edits or revisions? All right, is there a motion to adopt the August 28, 2024 meeting minutes as amended? So. Second. All right, it has been, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, everyone is voted, that is approved. Thank you. That will take us to item number 4, new business. This is the federal functional classification. Final recommendation for consideration and adoption. What I think, since we do have a very specific kind of area relative to the Woollen Mills area, I would recommend we just go through with the presentation as you would have planned to. Let's get all that through. If there are questions and or concerns outside of that area, maybe we could address those, and then we can address the one that has some public comment, because I'm sure we'll be looking at the city. Some direction from you all, conversation on your part. So if we kind of break it down that way, that might be a good way to move. Is that fair with everyone? Yeah, great. All right, Christine, I'm handing to you, yes?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to read through kind of a general overview. Some of this is within the staff memo that was included in the packet, but some of it is going back a meeting or two to make sure that we're starting from the same place. So
We started talking about this topic back in spring, correct?
May
May
was the first time it came before the board.
So it's not like this is not something we just now talking.
Correct.
And
Well, to your point, I think what's important to note is that in May, it was both countywide and citywide relative to the MPO footprint. And it's been back on the agenda since then, so this is actually the third appearance of the functional classification.
just wanted to make that clear for public.
Yep, and that's what I was about to go through,
Sorry.
is an overview. That's perfect. No, that's perfect segue. So in late April, MPO staff received from TMPD VDOT staff an email that they were conducting the major statewide update to the federal functional classification of all the roadways that's historically done after the decennial census. VDOT staff coordinated the review then with the MPO staff. In early May, MPO staff sent a request to all locality staff for their detailed review, and included in that email the draft GIS map, the comprehensive FC guide with all of the criteria and procedures to review, and the methodology that was used for the review. Then in May, in all of the MPO committee meetings, the policy board, the technical committee, and the Citizens Advisory Committee, the FC was introduced to the public to inform that a comprehensive review was underway. And again, that included the staff memo, the draft map, and a copy of the comprehensive guide of what review was going on with locality staff at the time. At that time, VDOT had already conducted their own review, and they had noted some changes in the map that had previously been approved but weren't within the map. So there's multiple reviews going on at the same time. Locality staff then conducted their comprehensive review and sent along to MPO staff, who then forwards to VDOT district staff any recommendations for revisions to the draft map as it was presented. District staff review and provide comments, and then schedule discussions with locality staff to review anywhere where they may have a discrepancy between locality staff or VDOT recommendation. Concurrence at that time was what was then provided to TMPD staff, and then TMPD staff does their review. TMPD reviews the requests, and then they provide their proposed revisions with comments However, at that time, a revised map wasn't quite ready. So in August, when we came before all of the committees, again, Policy Board, CTAC and MPO Technical Committee, we did give a thorough presentation on what federal functional classification was. That was a review 101 of what FFC is, why the classifications matter, and what the process or timeline for the review was. Provided a list of all the proposed revisions, along with both VDOT district staff and TMPD staff comments on each of the segments. However, the draft map wasn't available, so Campo staff recommended to you all that you defer a decision on that, because what is in the resolution is actually that you are approving what is in the map, not necessarily what is in any of the comments that are going back and forth. So before the policy board tonight is a final revised version of that map, along with a resolution that asks you to consider approval of the proposed changes, as well as documenting within that resolution, documenting to FHWA that the MPO was participating within VDOT's review, that it wasn't done completely by VDOT staff, that it involved the CA MPO and locality staff in that review. And then the state, upon your consideration, if that were approved, the state would then send the resolution and the finalized map up to Federal Highways for their review. And at that point, FHWA, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, FHWA completes their review and they finalize the classification map. Happy to take any questions. That's just process, just to make sure we're all where we landed here.
Any questions at this point on the process? Right.
Okay, that's the part that I have. The only other thing that I have for you all is consideration. Yeah.
Can Jack, you were proposing, probably like, could you give people a sense of what the MPO Tech Committee does relative to the MPO, and how the sort of quote sausage is made relative to the way the professionals are looking at this and going, what is the sort of due diligence process that's done at the level of city staff, VDOT staff, and your staff?
Yeah, I'll certainly phone a friend for this one, because we staff it as PDC staff. MPO technical staff is intended to be all of the folks that are practitioners of transportation planning, whether that is at, bike ped, locality, transportation planners, VDOT technical staff. There's several others, and they are the ones that are looking at, I think it's a 70-page guidance document on the criteria of the classification. What are the different things that you should use in order to identify what those particularly for this topic? I can certainly go broader if you need me to. And then looking at, and within that guidance document, if anybody has had a chance to put their eyes on it, it's looking at things like width of the streets, the sidewalks, all of the technical aspects of each roadway. They then used that guidance to look at each of the roadways in the map, and then provide not what they think it should be or what it will likely become, but what it is right now. How is that roadway functioning? Anybody, technical staff, that is not me. Anybody technical staff that wants to correct anything I'm saying, do not hesitate to jump in. And so there are, because this is a decennial review, it's looking comprehensively at the entire thing. If any changes are recommended mid-cycle within those 10 years, then there's a very similar process. Locality staff and or MPO staff and or VDOT could put in a request to say this roadway is no longer functioning the way that it's currently classified, and we would like to recommend a revision to the actual classification. Is that helpful?
Yes.
And did you need more on what MPO Tech does? Really, they are the technical advisory body to the policy board.
Yes. We rely on your expertise.
So just to kind of add to the clarification, there's like the standards that I reviewed before this, I reviewed my notes from the last meeting about, because we have been getting a lot of reviewing my notes. Because I remember being really like suspect of it at the beginning, then it was explained, and I was like, okay. But then I went back and looked at my notes and it was less helpful than I had hoped. But just to clarify, there's all the different types, and then they have certain specs and measurements, and the team that reviewed these would try to match what they are currently to the specs. But does that involve like going to the road Or is it like looking up on Google and like doing a little measurement and like, what is the?
Methodology.
Yes.
Sure, and I'm gonna correct something I said to make sure that I'm not misinforming. It is not a matrix of if it is this, it is that. There is a lot of overlap and a lot of area for discussion. So in some places, if it's between 1 and 3 feet, it could be this. If it's between 2 and 4, it could be that. And therefore there's that middle of the road where you have to have a lot of back and forth of let's look at all of these other characteristics. So it's not as straightforward as if X, then Y. And I think a lot of the ones we're talking about tonight and we're getting comments is because it's in that middle of the road. Like it even shows in the guidance document, like overlapping circles of like, there's a lot of cut and dry ones. And then there's a lot are just like, you have to do your best guess based on the information that you have before you. I'd have to go to local staff to talk about how you conducted your review.
Yeah, I mean, I think describing what we did.
Just to identify yourself.
I'm Ben Chambers, I'm the city transportation planning manager. So we conducted our review, I looked at this on our traffic engineer, the city engineer, as well as our vice headquarters, who also serves on the MPO committee. Generally, we were looking at sort of the obvious ones first. There were some big ones like Hillsdale Drive, wasn't previously listed 10 years ago because it wasn't constructed like it is today. So that was an obvious one. There were also some ones in there that were clearly errors from the last time. There was a spur that comes off at 9th Street Southwest off of West Main Street that is basically a cul-de-sac that was labeled as a minor arterial or something. So those are the obvious ones that we were like, that accusation. Then we get into some of these lower density neighborhoods like Wallen Mills, Johnson Village. We looked at some of the streets and said, how are these streets functioning? Because we know that there is traffic flowing through these neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods where there's vehicle traffic coming from them because they're all single occupancy houses, kind of spread apart a little bit more than some of our denser areas in town. So where are the cars going through here? So we looked at traffic volumes, we looked at street widths, we looked at destinations in that neighborhood, and what we know the park basis, since the park is a major one. We look at where is transit going through. Is there transit service along this? Is there sidewalks along here? Are there sidewalks that are planned along here that, when we talk about, is this going to be available for federal or state funding in the future? We need money for sidewalks. So that's a consideration that we looked at as city staff is this where we want to put sidewalks in the future? Is this where we want to put shared use path in the future? So we took all of those things into account and sort of looked at the neighborhood. There were some things that we suggested to VDOT that they said, you don't need to add this many new edits in here. Let's focus on the ones that really do make sense. So there were some things that we recommended that didn't get included in that network. There are some things that VDOT pointed out that maybe we should include. There was a little bit of a conversation between both of us because we look at our road network from a different perspective and we want to make sure that it is a consensus view between both of us before we report back to the feds and say, this is what we think our road network looks like. So does that help explain what we're doing?
Mr. Chambers, could I ask too, so with the recent upzoning of the city, I'm assuming, I would think that sort of plays into what you think these roads are going to be capable of 10, 20 years.
As well, and that's where there's sort of the difference between what we were doing and planning. So what we were doing was describing what the network is today and what we've already got in place.
Okay.
It's not necessarily planning for what this road is going to look like in the future. That's what we have our planning documents for. That's what we have our streets that were design guidelines for. Because in the city we own our streets, we make it as looks like in the future. That's a different classification system that we talk about within the city amongst ourselves and what we call the federal government that they talk on them. Collectors and arterials and all of that. And we're talking about zoning and how the city can run streets. We're talking about neighborhood A, neighborhood B, those kinds of terms that are different classification systems.
And the streets that weren't programmed in the city, that would still be intact.
Currently, that's our documents for.
And we own our streets in the city, so it's not like this would entail some sort of control from VDOT or anybody else to say, you're gonna double the size of your road.
Right, the only way that VDOT would be able to come in is we got to ask them to come in and ask them to spend money and ask them to spend it in a specific way. If we said VDOT, we want to build this road in this way, and VDOT said, are you gonna stick to those standards and can you then stuck to those standards? That would be on us, but it's based on our standards in the city.
Could I ask relative to the county, have y'all had feedback from citizens about this topic?
We followed a really similar process, conferring with our engineering team and transportation teams, but we also had a similar process. A lot of the ways the county is filled out, it's a lot easier to see which classification the roads probably should have. The county also went through a process, like in between this current functional reclassification and the previous one to change some of the functional classification of our entrance corridors. So we've had a time to look at it in between. Yeah, so similar but simpler.
Okay, thank you. Just ID yourself real quick. That's
Oh, yep, Jessica Hirsch-Bellamy, Albemarle County Community Development.
Thank you.
I have some additional questions, but I didn't know if you had more to go over, because I know we kind of started a process and then I didn't know if you had it.
Nope, I don't have a formal presentation. We gave the FFC formal presentation in the last meeting. We just deferred the decision.
So if I may, before we get to the specifics to what the public comment was about, are there other, and I see Supervisor Malik has her hand up, are there other outside of that public interest area that we need to address? Any concerns about changes there? Because I think that's what we should hit first. Supervisor Malik, go ahead and make your comment.
Thank you. So on a procedural basis, one of the difficulties that county residents have is speed limits and cut through traffic. So can someone explain to me whether these data points have impact on our ability to run a speed reduction process or to reduce speed if the data indicates for the roads in the county which are under VDOT control? Thank you.
You don't have an answer for that?
You want to answer that? Anyway,
Well, I can talk about that a little bit, and I think Chuck might have some information he can pull up as well to provide some additional detail, but there are standards. Sandy Shackelford, VDOT Cooperative District Planning. There are geometric standards that VDOT has based on the functional classification, but there's a range, like we're talking about the overlapping Venn diagrams. So if you go up from a local road to a collector, a minor collector, or a major collector, there'll be different geometric standards based on the speed limits, but you can operate within that range of speed limits based on what's appropriate for the road. And so that's kind of the high level. And Chuck, I'll defer to you if you want to jump in with any more specific information, or Supervisor Brown, let us know if you want more detail or if that generally answers your question.
And I'll jump in to say that that is not the case for city streets. We can set our own speed limits. We're working on figuring out how to do that.
Chuck,
I can
anything to
jump in. Excuse me, I can jump in a little bit. Chuck Proctor, I'm the district planning manager. In the guidelines for functional classification, as long as you're below an arterial, you can do a lot of things from an traffic calming perspective. They're not prohibited. Once you become an arterial, that's when a lot more stricter regulations come in, because you want to basically, those roads are for a lot more through traffic and to carry your commercial and your larger vehicles through your network. The collector road, like the ones we're talking about in the city right now, we're looking at the straight portions that go to Riverview Park and the Woolen Mills area to the east. So you do get a lot of traffic that's not doesn't have a destination necessarily on those roads, that it's through traffic. And as Ben pointed out earlier, these are transit routes, and those are the type of roads you want to have as your minor collector roads. They still follow speed limit is the part that creates the biggest requirements for those type of facilities. As long as you're at a 25 mile an hour speed, all of the difference between a local and a collector road are very minimal differences. The biggest difference is your maintenance dollars that go to do any maintenance on your road. If you're a minor collector or collector above, you can get federally reimbursed for the maintenance funding that you spend on a road. Whereas for local roads, those are all have to be burdened by the local governments or the state. And those are the biggest differences between the collector type of facilities versus the local facilities. And to address Ann's comment, it's the difference between collectors and arterials is where the biggest changes are. And I don't know specific examples that you're referring to, but as long as it's a collector road, there's still a lot of flexibility in what we can do, even in the county. The city has a lot more flexibility because they basically are the managers of the road. So they're the ones who are making the decisions on what improvements or not improvements are made along those corridors. It's not necessarily VDOT weighs in on those at all. It's going to be the locality that manages those road networks. Does that help with
Very
some
good.
of the explanations?
It does help, and I was not able to get the map to show me what I wanted. So I guess as long as the neighborhood streets, narrow 100-year-old streets with houses close to the road and no sidewalks are not ever in that arterial section, then I'm probably okay. But I was able to look at the color-coded map, but I couldn't get anything more granular than that. So I think my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Have anything specific, just reach out to us. We'll be happy to meet with you and go through it if you want.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think there are any roads in question in terms of changing classifications in the county, none that I'm concerned about. I certainly would have commentary, which I'm not going to give, but about it, but I don't think there's any dispute about any of those items. Are there any other things outside of the particular streets in question before we dive into that? Like process questions or other general questions?
It's kind of boring.
Be a good segue.
Yeah, let's use that. So I know in the city right now, we have, Mr. Chambers, who comes from a background that is bike head focused with transit experience. We have a bike head coordinator who gets it. We have, as deputy city manager who gets that. And I think what some people are concerned about probably is, I know I would be and am, is if we don't have all of you in place. And there's people who are less inclined for bike head transit infrastructure in more positions. Could they abuse these new classifications in some kind of way?
And why don't you go to the table to see your points out to the microphone?
Sure. I would be more concerned about other things than the functional classifications if that was the case with the staffing. The city staff already has plenty of flexibility when it comes to developing new standards and regulations that dictate what happens on our streets. We have our own standards and design manual, our own streets that work design manual as well that dictate what's on our streets. All you have to do is update those. Updating the functional classification just gets us opportunities to get funding for paving. It gets us opportunities to get funding for grants, for things like smart scale, for things like TAP funding, where you might want to be able to point out that, hey, this is an important street in my neighborhood that we need to focus on. That's what this opened us up to. There's not really, I mean, there are a lot of nefarious things that people would will attempt to do with that, but I think we're worried about the tools that staff currently has at their disposal to change city streets than this thing that's just reporting to the federal government what we need, basically.
And to add to that, Councilor Ashton, a lot of those funding sources that he's talking about come to council or the MPO policy board for approval anyway. So there would still be the governing bodies that would have to approve those staff decisions to put in applications or receive the funding.
So are there specific questions about the neighborhood in question that you guys have? I guess my first question before I go there, is this something that if we change, like, I don't know, I'll use my own example. If I wanted East Royal Road to be a different classification and provided a rationale and said, here's my case, and this body agreed with me, can VDOT or the feds go, no, it has to be this classification? Can our decision or our thoughts or opinions be, I guess, thrown out to their own labeling.
You mean after this fact?
Yeah.
After a vote?
I mean, we went through all of this.
Modified.
It sounds like we made a request, they agreed with us. It sounds like they pointed out a few that said, hey, take a look at this, what's your opinion on it? So it sounds like there was a back and forth.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing at some point there could be a road where it's like, no, I want East Rider Road to be a local street. That's a bad example, but it's a minor arterial now. But if I wanted that to be a major collector and it just didn't jive, I guess the feds could be like, no.
Well,
Is that possible?
this is a process question of where does this vote go from here?
This vote, the VDOT staff is actually the one conducting this analysis. We are supporting that. They will then take the resolution and the map and send it up to FHWA. FHWA, as far as I understand, has the final word.
So they could, if we change something, regardless of what the example is, they could be like, no, we're not changing that. And
That's my understanding, but anybody
Get over-
VDOT might know that better. That's my understanding.
Can weigh in. We typically haven't had any issues with FHWA not approving something or making changes. I know in the county, we had an interim changes. They wanted to upgrade 250 east of the city to a minor arterial, and we actually ran it all the way to Fluvanna County, Route 15, and then Avon Street South, mainly their entrance corridors into the county, into the urbanized area. They wanted to upgrade them to minor arterial. And we basically went through the process and submitted the information to central office, who submitted it to FHWA, and it was approved. So, I mean, typically we haven't had issues with them approving changes. So after this is adopted, if we wanted to change something, it can still happen. It's just a process you have to go through to document why you want to do it and mapping why, and have a resolution of support from the locality and the MPO.
Understood, thank you. All right, Council.
If this gets approved and Market and Chesapeake are reclassified as minor arterial or minor collectors, collectors. What happens to them next?
We are working through figuring out what our long-term planning is, but we would be looking at. East Market is a tier 3 sidewalk project in our sidewalk priorities, so we would include that fact in any grant application. I'm not sure exactly what we have planned for Chesapeake off the top of my head, but if there are grant applications for us to proceed with, that's the kind of thing we would use in that. There are also similar upgrades happening throughout the city, so we're going to have to sort of balance our priorities and figure out what we're going to do over the next 3 to 5 years. That's the kind of work that we're working on right now, is to figure out sort of that order of operations and how we're going to pull that off. But where possible, we would use the functional classifications as a justification for why we should be able to do more like that, investments in transit and whereas to be highlighted as important where we go.
Is that something that has worked elsewhere, or are we hoping then we get the money that we're applying for?
I think we're hoping that we're getting the money. When you're applying for grants, you're always showing how it's aligning with other plans and documents that have gone through consideration over recent years. When you're looking at this specific area, this functional classification update would be one of those planning efforts that we would point to as, hey, we did this update, we identified it as a part of our network that's important. That would just be supporting documentation of any sort of grant application that we do. And I don't know, I don't have any examples to draw and point to. Someone has definitely done this strategy before.
It's not like Arlington were copying.
No, but it is just one stick that we could throw in the pile of reasons why we should have that grant. That's a useful thing for them to know.
Anything else? Good, you, Brian? Yeah.
I'm fine, yeah.
So at this point then, I mean, I kind of look into the city because the city streets came up. Is there any changes or alterations we want to make versus the recommendation?
There's none that I would like to make. I support what is in the proposal and that's awesome.
I again find myself like, okay, I would. Like last one, I was like, this is suspicious, and then I've been talked into understanding it better.
What do you consider suspicious?
Not suspicious, just, you know, my gut instinct with roads is, and streets is,
Afraid to kind of blow them up and make it bigger.
it's just always, there's been 100 years of that as evidence. And so when it's, someone comes along who is pro bike Penn Transit, who gets it, and I'm inclined to, you know, I trust Ben, and his theories, so like that's comforting to know, but, yeah, in general, I mean, just cities all over the country have been destroyed for the last 70, 80, 90 years in order to create more car infrastructure. And so I empathize with all of the commentary that we've been getting about people who haven't gotten these full presentations, and are nervous that this sounds like, okay, now we're available to widen your road, and then we're gonna put up, you know, big highway construction for your city, because that has happened before. There is evidence of that. So I get that sense of unease, but this isn't that.
I think there's some other things to worry about if you had that staff
Yes.
at
Is
your
that,
disposal.
and is this on any way kind of on the road to that?
No, this is more reporting what we have already than pointing us in a direction.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then, I'm sorry, I was just looking at one. Great, then I mean, unless there's other comments to be made or questions to be made, then this is an action item we need to take a look.
The motion would be for the policy board to approve the resolution with the proposed updates.
I think before you make the motion, I'll just make the comment that having had in the county for us, the entrance corridors specifically, and kind of wading into this a little bit, and knowing how classifications play out in my particular district, I'm sharing the ease of concern about how that limits or produces any other types of activities. Just watching this play out with smart scale of the road projects we've done, traffic calming, speed limits, all that sort of stuff. I've yet to see where the classification has become an impediment or an obstacle to achieve road plans in the county. Jessica, are there any where that has become that you're aware of?
No.
And if it did become an obstacle, to Rocker's point earlier, you change it. We've part of the whole entrance corridor piece and getting that all lined up was us going through what we saw as a proper change to how they were classified, lined up with other priorities in the county, not just the classification itself.
Now, Will, if I could just make a city-centric point real quick, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I appreciate the comments that have been made about, promises have been made before about this, that, or the other, as we said earlier, in Georgia, this, that, or the other. It's very hard as an elected official to kind of steps into something, dealing with the past and trying to move towards the future, particularly with a highly transient constituency. It's a challenge. What I will say is that if you look at what our city manager proposed on Monday night, at the first part of the meeting during reports, and it's now online, you can download it. There's several parts of that, but one of them was focused specifically on pedestrian. We had this individual, this tragedy that happened, and others have been pointing out other places that we need crosswalks and so on. The point I guess I'm trying to make is I can't speak for the past. What I can speak for is we're really trying to bring the staff on board, and I feel like it's on board with the city manager. He gets it. We're to try to get to 25 miles an hour across the whole city, if that's possible. So I know that words are cheap, but we're trying to do what we can. So I'm happy to make this resolution.
Very good. So we're ready pretty much.
I would move this resolution approving the proposed updates to the highway system's federal functional classification.
Second,
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll call the roll of this vote.
Supervisor Malik,
yes,
Supervisor Galloway,
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston,
Yes.
Counselor Oshrin, Ms. Laundry.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. The motion carries. And I would say that if there are issues that we would both, the city council and the Albemarle County, I would imagine would encourage folks outside, I mean, if there's issues you're seeing on your road, to bring that to our attention so that it can be addressed, whatever it is, whether it's traffic comment or infrastructure or. Because I know in the county, there's certainly a lot of hot spots for things.
We're getting quite a bit of feedback right now, I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So,
It seems to be the thing that we constantly get feedback on are the roads, out in the county as well. All right, very good. Then we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is number 5, VDOT update on projects. And Mr. Proctor, you're gonna walk us through this one? Think?
yes. Let me share my screen real quick here. Hold on. All right. All right, we had a lot of questions come up this round of Smart Scale dealing with cost estimates and particularly the divergent diamond at Fifth Street, how the project cost changed over time. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So basically we're coming back with you on basically the process that we went through for the Fifth Street interchange update, and then so we can see where we're at in the end and possible next steps if the project's not funded this round. Basically, I'll give you an overview, the project constraints, the alternatives we looked at, the cost estimates, and the timeline, and then we'll get into the next steps. Basically, this is the process we went through to develop the application. We started later in the year. Basically this was identified as a project in late 2023, and we started a very intensive study to get it to the point where we could submit it as an application. And this is the process we went through to get there. And these are the people that were involved in it, all the different sections that we had to work through to actually get it in on time frame. The biggest thing was getting Bridge to evaluate it and get back with us on what their criteria is, and they changed it sort of late in the game, which caused us to have to up the estimate to include the full bridge replacement. But I'll get into that in a minute. Next is basically the reason what we looked at is we do have a lot of crashes that are occurring at both intersections on that bridge, and we are having queuing that's actually backing up down the westbound or the eastbound off ramp out onto 64. So we need to get those addressed because those are going to continue to be problematic and create more hazards and more crashes. So we need to come up with a solution. That's why we came up with a divergent diamond. We did consider 4 other options. Optimized diamond, where we basically just look at the optimization of the lane configurations and the signals and try to optimize it as the best to get the most efficiency out of the operations as we can without doing major changes. We did include pedestrians connections across the bridge because that was something that was identified in the Fifth Street study, which was previously looked at. We considered a single point, which is basically reconfigure of the whole interchange. The divergent diamond, which we looked at that because we figured that we wouldn't have to rebuild the entire bridge to put that in. We could just reconfigure the lanes, but that didn't actually come to fruition in the end once they started getting to the details of the structure itself. And then we looked at the existing conditions with just adding sidewalk. Basically, from an eligibility standpoint, these are the options we looked at, and these are the benefits for each one. As you can see, is the divergent diamond gave us the best safety benefit at a moderate cost, and gave us moderate operational benefit, which was higher than most of the other ones. The single point gave us the best, but it also cost the highest. And in for our area type for smart scale, we're an area type C. So these are the percentage multipliers that we get for that. And this is a comparison from 5 to 6. So basically we want to have projects that have high safety improvements and address congestion. Those typically give us the best benefit. This is the concept we had actually put in for the application, which shows the DDI. It also includes a shared use path across the bridge through the median, and connects to the shared use trail that's already funded on the north end, and it ties into the sidewalk on the south end of the project. And this was what was adopted as a preferred alternative from public feedback, as well as what was initially recommended in the previous study. The cost estimate, as you can see here, it was ended up being $79 million total. Part of that cost was a change in the bridge cost, which from originally we were looking at just possibly doing the deck replacement, but once bridge got into the details, because of the type of bridge deck it was, and this status of the substructure, they felt that we should replace the whole bridge. So that's what we ended up including in the cost, which caused the cost to be higher, much higher than what we expected it would be. And you can see down here, basically the $16 million, which was more than what we thought it was going to be. So basically, this is the process we went through. We started going through in the fall and looking at the existing conditions. And then by January, we identified what the alternatives, we evaluated the alternatives in the early part of the year. And then we came up with a preferred alternative by May. And then we had to develop the concepts, evaluate the risk, and then put together the final cost estimate. And that's the issue, is because once you get the preferred alternative, there's no loop, or the loop takes more time than what we had available. And that's why we couldn't actually go back and look at a different alternative that had less impacts on the bridge. Because we could have looked at a divergent diamond with a separate bike ped bridge adjacent to the structure, and might not have had to address the issue with the bridge replacement on the existing structure, and still been able to do the divergent diamond. That's something that we can reevaluate later, but basically that's where we ended up. So right now we're waiting for the smart scale review and evaluation to see how this stacks up against the other projects in the area. It is still a competitive application because it does have a high safety and congestion relief because of the divergent diamond, but the cost may make it prohibitive. There's a lot of changes between 5 and 6 with smart scale, so I can't really predict how well it's going to do, but compared to the other projects in the district, I think this one stands up fairly well from a high priority standpoint. We're doing some analysis overall of the projects across the state, but we don't have any data yet. They're still finalizing a lot of the estimates in the other districts. So we don't have a good data set yet to go for, but we are looking into that to see how well we're going to stack up. But like I said, we're going through scoring now, and we won't know what the final outcome of that scoring will be until January. Any questions?
Yeah. Okay, maybe I missed what was said at some point in the meeting. I don't remember that we ever decided. My memory doesn't include a bridge replacement. When did that become part of the discussion? Is that today? Are we finding that?
That's why we're talking about this, is because through the application process, once they got in and started looking at the bridge, it is determined that if we wanted to do the design that is submitted, it would require the bridge replacement.
Right, okay, and so that's what we're revising, or that's what.
You're looking at the revised cost estimate that actually went in because it would require that bridge replacement.
Okay, I was.
You got it.
This loop right here on the screen is where the issue comes in. We were in this 3-month window when we identified that the full bridge was going to be need to be replaced. And we didn't have enough time to go back through and separate out the shared use path on a separate facility and redo the whole evaluation.
Which is.
Well,
We
assume-
didn't identify the bridge replacement until July.
I don't want to make an assumption, but assuming this does not get funded, we would then have the option to go through a start over process.
That's the alternative.
Yes.
And I can tell you that I'm already setting that up for reevaluation in the next round of pipeline studies. We have round 3 of pipeline studies is we're looking at locations right now, and as one of those projects, I'm looking at the 5th Street corridor to include 5th Street Station Parkway intersection, as well as the interchange, to look at alternatives. So we can actually, that intersection at 5th Street Station needs to be updated because of the changes that the city's making with the 5th Street corridor. So I want to make sure that we're looking at what the city wants to do on that intersection, and we can incorporate that and carry it all the way through. And as part of that, we'll relook at the interchange. Part of the process is we have to update the interchange alternatives report because we're looking at a different alternative. So that's a significant study undertaking. So I can't just necessarily do that really quickly. So what I was going to do was set that up for another study moving forward, starting this first of next year, end of this year, first of next year.
Okay, so just to recap, to make sure that I fully understand, we submitted the proposal during the course of discussions about the proposal, the bridge has to be replaced. And so that was then, the proposal was amended to include a bridge replacement. If that gets approved and gets smart scale funding, then that moves forward. If it doesn't, we can reapply for the design later.
We can go through the STAR study process to look at different alternatives.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to look at just an alternative of the divergent diamond basically the shared use path on a separate structure next to the bridge to see if we can reduce the cost because we're not having to deal with that whole bridge replacement. I've talked to L&D section and they're confident that we can do the mitigation on the bridge without having to actually maybe not even replace the deck of the bridge. And then we could deal with the bridge itself as through the state of good repair program, as opposed to having to absorb the cost of the bridge replacement in the project.
Yeah, the bike lane down the center of the DDI was always something that I didn't love about this project as someone who prefers biking. That just didn't seem like a fun experience to be in the middle of that. So I'm excited to hear that the potential for a separate bike ped infrastructure could possibly be a part of the project.
There are several examples across the country with the shared use path in the middle of the bridge. It's behind barriers, so you basically have barrier on both sides, and you're basically in a shared use path area between the barriers that goes across, and you have crosswalks at either end. And there's a lot of examples across the country where they've built them like that. So it's not something that's new. It will be new for this area, but not new across the country.
Where's the nearest one shop? You can go ride it and see.
Yeah, I'm trying to Google some pictures and I'm mostly getting renderings, so.
Yeah.
Trail, that's the one they always.
All right, so Supervisor Malik, your hands up.
That'd be another trail over the beltway.
Thank you. So thank you, Chuck, for bringing up the most recent approach of getting the bridge out of the smart scale project, because it seems really unfair to tank a really important mobility project because it's tripled in cost because of a giant bridge. So I'm hopeful about that. And I love the idea of hanging the pedestrian thing off to the side, only because when I'm on 29 and looking at the people trying to walk in the center of 29 between Morton Drive and Angus, there always is a look of terror on the part of people trying to do that with a pram, stroller, grocery bags, whatever. And I know we spent a long, long time many years ago trying to figure out a better way to get pedestrians through that tricky intersection. So I'm always grateful for looking outside the box as far as getting our pedestrians away from the heat of the cars and into some place where there can be some shade and true bona fide separation. So thank you very much.
Any other questions here on Fifth Street?
I appreciate the consideration for where it's gonna meet up with the city project. Because, yeah,
That was one of the things we definitely wanted to be cognizant of, and I talked to Ben about it when we were looking at this, and that you guys were making changes in the city, and we wanted to make sure that they were carried through to the interchange. So that's going to give us the tool to do that. And if the project is funded, we're still going to move forward with that study. It just won't, the termini will be different.
Great, thanks.
Okay, you can go to the next one.
All right, hold on, let me switch out now. Let's see which one's next. Ivy Road.
See what Sandy said about it. Nobody hurt your eyes. Nobody look.
Happy birthday.
Okay, can you see my screen again?
Oh, we've seen your screen the entire time.
Okay, did it change though? Ivy Road. Basically, we're wrapping up the study. We're working on finalizing the comments and the preferred alternative and the final recommendations in the study. And basically, it went too far. One slide too far. Here we go. This is the preferred comments or preferred solution from the study that we're going to, as the main recommendations. There's some other long-term considerations that we're going to include also, but these are the main comments. Basically, we're having a roundabout at Boar's Head Drive, Birdwood, or not next to Birdwood, that intersection right here to the west. And then we have a roundabout at the Bel Air Market at Canterbury. And then we're going to close the median between those two roundabouts. So basically you have a roundabout and a roundabout. And that will basically address a lot of the congestion and safety issues that we have at these two intersections. We're also going to look at extending the A-cell and D-cell lanes on the old Ivy Road ramps. And that will still be the main access way to and from the bypass for 250 traffic. We aren't looking at doing anything with the current ramps that are there now on 250 off of Ivy Road. We're also looking at what we call a triangle about, which is basically a one-way circle around those three roads that make up that little triangle that's on the route off of Old Garth Road and Old Ivy and the road into Stab, as well as a shared use path along Old Ivy Road all the way to the underpass on the east side. We're also looking at reconfiguring the underpass on the east end to accommodate a 6-foot sidewalk, or 6 to 7 foot, whatever width we can get under there, and 1 lane of traffic. And right now we're looking at signalizing it so you can still have 2-way traffic underneath there that will be signalized. But that's basically, this is the recommendations that we're putting forward with the final document of the study. Any questions about, well, I can go into the other ones. There's some other long-term, these are some long-term recommendations. I mean, suggestions, not really recommendations. There's not a lot of needs out in these, out to the west of there to where you really need to look at these right now, but we looked at the whole corridor to provide some suggestions to this county as to what they may want to consider if they want to pursue projects out in this area or when needs start to develop. Because right now there's not a lot of issues out there currently. But these would be there for consideration. The connector road, which makes sense. I mean, there's stub outs at the east end and the west end. Roundabout at Farmington. Now, we could do this. I know there's been some skepticism about it because of the railroad crossing. But if you add a left turn lane and you signalize the left turn lane and you signalize the right turn lane in the westbound direction, when the railroad crossing is closed, you could still, the roundabout would still operate because you could just stop those volumes from that would be going into Farmington. So they wouldn't enter the roundabout. So there's some options there, but like I said, these are some long-term solutions if the county wants to consider them.
Is there, I can't tell from this map, is there any bike ped infrastructure?
Out on these, when we did the study, we weren't really sure where there's a 3-notch trail study. So where the trail's going to actually go and where the facilities would be are still up in the air. We're not precluding it in the study. And I know when we did some of the initial work for the White Gables development, we actually had a shared use path that was shown on the concept along 250 for a short section of the road. And it was never built as part of the road, part of the development project. Project went in, but there's opportunities to put those in there and we could consider those in the future. But we need to figure out where they want to run it, because you could run it through the south side through the Boar's Head property. There's a lot of options, so I didn't want to put it somewhere and that not be where we're going to put it. So it's left it open for future consideration.
Okay, thanks, because I know there is bike lane when you get closer to town on 250 and, you know.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, once you get to Old Ivy Road at the east end, the shared use path, you can actually take the shared use path all the way to Old Garth Road. The issue is going to come in at the underpass at the west end, because there's not capacity there for getting bikes underneath the underpass. So but we need to know where the 3-notch trail is going to go before we really can plan where we're going to go with the bike lanes continuing west from this point on, because we don't necessarily know where alignment's going to be. This is the interchange improvements, and these are something that's probably needed because of the poor geometry at the interchanges and the short A cell and D cell lanes, but we didn't get support for it from the community, so we're not looking at these are really long-term solutions. But if we have to widen the bypass at some point in the future, definitely beyond my career, this might be something that may be reconsidered at that time, because we could actually not move the ramps further south. We could keep the ramps here and just extend them underneath the bridges. The bridges are just too narrow right now to extend those A cell and D cell lanes further to the north. But to do the bridge replacements, it would require replacing all 3 of the basically 3 bridges, because the railroad bridge, the Old Ivy Road Bridge, and the 250 bridge, the railroad bridge and the Ivy Road Bridge are integrated, so they would have to be replaced together because it's basically one structure. The Old Ivy Road is separate, but it would have to be required too because it can't accommodate widening of the 250 bypass. But like I said, this is a really long-term recommendation. And then the other thing as part of this, to do the railroad replace the railroad bridge, we'd have to double track the railroad through this area because we gotta maintain the rail service along this corridor. That is an active rail line. And let's see, the next one is. This is the stuff that's on the east end. These are some other additional improvements that the city might or the county might want to consider for the various intersections between Old Ivy Road and the interchange. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, we're reviewing the we've done the eastern analysis on the east end, and it will work based on the analysis, but we're not sure from a safety perspective if we can make it safe for vehicles. We can make it safe for pedestrians, but we're concerned about, because the vehicles aren't going to be able to see each other, and there's such a long distance between where the stop bar is on the north side of Old Ivy Road and where the intersection is on the south side, that people might get in there when they're not supposed to be in there and cause a problem. So that's something that we'll have to evaluate, but the analysis shows that we can make it work from an operational standpoint. We're working on developing high-level planning cost estimates for these improvements, and once we get those, we'll be finalizing the study. Any questions? Because that's my last slide on that.
Well, assuming that university's been part of these conversations.
Yes, we've presented this, and the county's presented it to the board. We presented it at LUPIC, and the university's been part of the stakeholders group committee, so they've been involved in it throughout the process.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Matt?
Thank you very much. Let me go to my list of questions here. All right, so there was originally to be significant work as far as the pipeline study on Old Ivy Road from the access to the northbound bypass and the eastern trestle. And I don't see any of those improvements in your list unless I was blind and didn't look at them. So that was, I mean, the east-west of Old Ivy Road, where there is no, sidewalk. And the concern when there was a zoning application there a couple of years ago, and that was when we first heard about this pipeline study, and VDOT made great assurances that they were going to solve the problem. But there is no report on that section for the impact on pedestrians and things there. So I'll just leave that thought with you, and you can help me understand that better offline. Question, so will there be a light at the triangle about on the exit, the westbound exit on the bypass to what is now the local traffic only to the western trestle? And the reason I'm asking is because when it is anytime after about 2:30 in the afternoon, it is a steady stream of high-speed traffic coming down that exit ramp. And it looks like your plans will many times magnify the numbers of people going around the triangle about, making that left turn off Faulkner Drive onto the bypass ramp. I forget what you call that. It has a name apparently. And so how do we handle that? Because I'm afraid that if there isn't some control to get people out into the traffic lane, then everything is going to back up back onto Old Ivy westbound, and then nothing will happen. So that has been something I've been mentioning off and on for a long time, and I haven't ever gotten an answer about that. So perhaps you have one.
That was done when we analyzed it. We're extending the ramp so that at least the traffic that's backing up there doesn't back out onto the bypass. We're extending that off ramp, but the queuing is still going to be there as much as we can. I'm hoping the roundabout, our analysis shows that the roundabout addresses a lot of that queuing issue. I had it in one of my previous presentations, but I don't have it for in this presentation that shows what that queue is. In the PM in the future. So I don't have that right in front of me. As to the intersection at the road that goes back to Stab and Faulkner, I don't think there's a plan to put a signal there. It's going to be a stop controlled. Now I don't know if that off ramp is going to be controlled by a stop sign or how that's going to be controlled.
Okay.
So I can't answer that question.
But there will be a stop sign, which is a huge improvement for the people on the exit ramp. And it just
I
crossed my
don't
mind.
know. Like I said, I don't know if that's stop controlled or not.
Okay,
Whether
all
it's
right.
whether it's a three-way, it would be a three-way stop possibly, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But you won't have any
And the other,
bound traffic on that road because they would have to go around the triangle and just go across that intersection.
right, it's, believe it or not, it's a lot harder than you think.
I
Is
know.
there a 2-lane so that there's a protected people from Faulkner Drive who could have the right of way and go into a left of 2 lane, similar to what you did over on Route 20 to have a protected left lane for entering? That, I'll just leave that thought with you because I don't want to take everybody's time thinking about that. Let me go back to my last question here to find it. Okay. You mentioned that there will still be well, the light from 250 East at the city line going under the eastern trestle seems to no longer have a left turn light to let people who are in the left turn lane at the eastern end of 250 at the city line turn left to go down under the eastern trestle to go up to town. And I was there the other day at 5 o'clock and it was just completely a shambles and everybody was pulling out of the left turn lane and going up to Foods and coming back around. And I don't know how long that lasted. So if it's supposed to be working and it was just a malfunction, that's one thing. But if it's something that does not have a left turn lane, then someone should block off the left turn place that shows that people are supposed to be able to do that, because at rush hour, there's absolutely no way to get out and no one will be generous to stop. The only last thing is, has the proffer for the light that was made when White Gables was approved, was I think $500,000, still working? And can that be changed to something else as far as the structure, or was it only for the stoplight that we were supposed to have, 10, 15 years ago? Thank you.
On the proffers, I don't know. That would be something the county would have to
Okay.
see what that would be, because they could use that if there's a proffer there, they could use it as a towards the application
Right.
for the project in Smart Scale in the future. Regarding the left turn lane, we're showing it as being removed as part of the project for the westbound or the eastbound left turn lane to Old Ivy Road. We're showing that as being removed because it's a low volume. There's not very many people that make that maneuver. And it just causes more issues at the intersection. So we're basically just allowing the through and the right turn onto Old Ivy Road at that intersection.
Okay, now I'm glad to know that because I won't make that mistake again. The other end, getting off 64 to go was just a complete, that's why so many people were going east in order to go west by trying to go around the block, because we sat there for like 15 minutes on the loop and nothing was happening. So anyway, as you well know, this is a really complicated location with lots of people trying to go lots of places, and getting to and from work, at those troubled times of day really is an issue for a lot of folks. So thank you, Chuck. Appreciate your help.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I can check Natalie here. For the two-way signal at the underpass with the bike ped infrastructure, do we have an approximate timeline on having this work, or what's the soonest we could possibly see that happen?
That would have to be up to the localities. Right now, we're just doing the study. It would have to be wrapped into an application for funding and submitted for a funding program. But right now, we don't have any funding programs that it's slated for. It could be submitted for Smart Scale for next round, or it could be broken up into pieces and submitted for revenue share. And depending on how small a project is, it could even go for, I don't think you'll get it for TAP. I think it's too big of a project for TAP application, but revenue share would actually qualify. It's just a matter of for the shared use path, to get to Ann's question on the shared use path and Old Ivy Road, the bridge, this would require a separate bridge across the 250 bypass, parallel to the existing bridge, because we can't fit the trail on the existing bridge. So that's going to be a driving factor in the cost. But the shared use path from the bridge east could be built as a separate project, through a separate funding program, along with the improvements at the east end. At least it would allow for all those developments on that road between the interchange and the east end. They could access it and use it to get into the city, which currently they don't have anything right now.
Not anything safe. Yeah, okay, thanks, because I, that's right on the border of the city and the county, and so it's an awkward place to make a decision.
Yeah, we'll have to work with the county and the MPO on getting what they want to submit prepped so that we can put together, help them with their applications for the funding programs as they come up.
Thank you.
Mr. Espy, you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Chuck, for all this. Jason here. I really like the way that you said that you were gonna coordinate Fifth Street Exchange project, interchange, whatever happens there, DDI, non-DDI, replace bridge, not replace bridge, with the city's study, right? The spirit there is to coordinate. When it comes to the Ivy corridor, this is such an important corridor for so many people, for all these jurisdictions, and it's complicated because there's rail involved, there's traffic, and there's intersections involved. But could the same courtesy be extended to the 3 Notch Trail project, understanding that's a $2.1 million project that's going to study non-motorized, internal combustion engine, non-motorized along the whole corridor. It's really important section, the whole Ivy corridor, both the west, the middle, and the end for that TNT. So to what extent can you speak to the timeline of what's happening or could happen here and how it could be coordinated with the findings and recommendations of the TNT study? I just don't want to get that lost in the weeds. There's an opportunity here. It seems that there could be many connections.
I agree. I mean, I want to do more due diligence to make sure we're all on the same page and working with the various localities and the university. Mostly it's going to be in the county because most of that is going to be to the west. We're going to have this recommendation here, but there is still the opportunity, if we do in the future work on the 250 corridor and those bridges, you could run it across along Ivy Road, possibly in the future. But I like I said, until we get more details about where we're going to put the 3 Notch Trail, and I'm not as involved in that study. We will be coordinating it. We will be represented on that study with the county, but I'm not really plugged into that per se, but I definitely want to make sure that we're coordinating it, because this has been something that we've been trying to look at for a long time, because you could actually run that trail anywhere from 64 all the way to Garth Road. Anywhere in that corridor, you could run a trail. You could even follow the 76 bike route if you wanted to. It's just a matter of where does the county want to run it, and where does the public want to get the utility from it at? I mean, so like I said, there's a lot of ins and outs on that one that we'll have to work through.
All right, other questions or comments here? Chuck, you got anything else?
Yeah, one more presentation. Hold on 1 second here now.
Did read all of Sandy's comments, now you can.
Oh yeah, let me close this out. So,
How many times did I have when you were?
All right, last presentation, stars and pipeline studies. Hopefully this will go pretty quick. Basically, we've already got the star studies identified, and we've gotten consultants on board for all of those. Let me get this. Oh, here we go. So basically, here's the two programs and the differences between the two. They're not that much different. Actually, the STARS program's been around since the early 2000s. We did a couple of the first STARS studies in Albemarle County. One of them was on 20 north of 250, and the other one was on 53 from 20 all the way into Fluvanna. So those were some of the preliminary ones, but basically these are the sort of the ins and outs of the two studies. And there's a little bit of difference in the timeframes. We do STAR studies pretty much continuously. We have a new round every year, but I mean, you could actually start a STAR study in the interim if they have capacity available through the on-call consultants. The pipeline studies, they basically line up with the SMART scale. We're getting ready to kick off the next round for the round 6 of SMART scale. So this will be round 3 of pipeline. But basically the groups, we have stakeholders groups for both, for both studies. And we basically have the same people pretty much involved. They may have a little bit of different name, but it's pretty much the same folks. We coordinate with the localities, like for Ivy Road, we had a lot more people involved in that one. We had actually had other meetings outside of the typical framework document that's in pipeline, because we met with the Lupic folks and they had a separate focus group that they coordinated with that we helped provide material on for the county. So there is some flexibility with those programs. The timeframes are more stringent with pipeline versus there's a lot more flexibility with STARS. But they basically can cover pretty much every type of study we want to do. Next. Okay, so right now we have 3 STAR studies in this area. One of them is Emmett Street 29, and it's going to start at Barracks Road and run through basically up to Hydraulic Road, and then it's going to go on the bypass from Barracks Road around to Hydraulic Road. We never really looked at this with the Solutions 29 area. We did look at the hydraulic area, but we didn't really focus on the 250 corridor or the interchange. So we're actually going to focus on that particular location because we really haven't come up with a solution. We've looked at it probably 4 or 5 times since I've been here through various studies, but we haven't really come up with a solution. Back even from the initial stuff when we looked at it from Places 29 and the H250 study that the MPO did with the county, where they looked at like a spooey with a triple left off of the bypass onto Emmett Street. So, I mean, we're going to relook at that to see what we can do to make that work. From the study that we did before, or the application that we funded before, we actually pulled out Angus because of funding constraints. So we actually removed it from the project to fund the other 2 location improvements along Hydraulic Road. So we're going to actually look at that. We'll include the Hillsdale Extended. There's some with the study that we did before for the Solutions 29 and the hydraulic area study. We saw that the hydraulic 250 interchange or intersection started to fail in the future year. So we want to look at that to see if there's some solutions there that we can implement that might help address some of those future problems. As well as that section from the bypass to Barracks Road in the city, it's not really been studied. So we wanted to work with the city on trying to see if there's anything multimodal we can look at, possibly look at addressing the bike pedal on that corridor. I know Ann brought up that issue with the median, how it runs down the median of the road through the intersection, to see is there something we can do differently there to better accommodate the other modes through that corridor. So that's the one part of it. The second part is another study. We're doing northern portion, which goes from Hydraulic Road north to Woodbrook, which is just north of the first intersection north of Rio Road. We're gonna look at that corridor. I didn't want to look at the whole corridor through Airport Road. I'm breaking it in half. And Woodbrook is where the coordinated signal timing plan, that's the center of that coordinated signal timing network. So that's the best location to try to do 2 studies for that corridor. So we're looking at this section as one, and we're going to look at multimodal to see if we have a lot of safety issues. Actually, the number one segment and the top 2 PSI locations are on this corridor. So we want to look at that to see if there's some kind of solutions we can come up to address the safety issues as well as the multimodal issues on the corridor. There is some operation, but it's not that significant that we would like to address, but I know the county wants to look at multimodal on the corridor, and we also don't want to rule out possible transit options if there's some future BRT or something that the community might want to consider. And if there's something that we can identify with this study, it could be something that could be built as part of a project. There's those 2 studies. And then the last one is we wanted to pick a location in the city that we could basically look at, not a big corridor, that we could get consensus on the process so we could do some more studies with the city. So we picked worked with Ben and the city staff and identified the Main Street, Ridge, McIntyre, Water Street, South Water Street intersection as a location that we would like to study. I know from firsthand experience, I saw bicyclists get T-boned in that intersection. So I know there's a lot of issues there, the way it's configured. It was previously submitted and the application was pulled back. So we'd like to really work with the city on come up with solutions that address the needs that they have in the city at that location. So those are the 3 studies we have moving forward for STARS. Any questions about those?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
Anything?
Ann, question.
Oh, Ann, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Is there more length to come on the newly extended left turn lane on eastbound bypass to northbound hydraulic? Because I think somebody's project added 5 or 6 car spaces there, but it still unfortunately jeopardizes the left lane all the way up to the bridge. And so that's a little scary location as well. I'm just checking on the process.
We'll relook at that. That was something that was part of the application that's currently being built right now. That included the roundabout and the improvements at hydraulic. They added that piece to the project. So but we're going to relook at all of that to make sure there's not something else we can do to further improve that area.
Thank you.
All right, pipeline studies. These are the 2 pipeline locations. Like I said, we're going to look at the 5th Street corridor, which is the eastern one on this little diagram. Basically starts at Harris Road, I think it is, and goes all the way through the interchange. So we're going to look at take into consideration what the city wants to do on the 5th Street corridor and just carry it through the corridor. We'll relook at the improvements that were previously recommended for the intersection and submitted for smart scale to see if we need to change those and what we can get that might work better than what we've already tried for. So those are that's one application. The other application is the 118 interchange. This was been looked at several times. We addressed one of the issues that were mainly on 64 by closing the one loop ramp, but it's creating issues on the 250 south or the 29 south bound direction in the PM. So we want to relook at that to see if there's anything we can do to improve that operations. We also want to look at the park and ride lot. There's a little park and ride lot on Teal Lane, which is right just south of the interchange, that we want to actually make a park and ride lot as opposed to parking on the side of a road. which is what it is now, and it's very limited. So we want to basically relook at that and come up with a regular park and ride lot that actually a transit bus could possibly use if they wanted to get transit to it. The reason the box goes further north is we may have to look at Fontaine, not necessarily the interchange itself, but the weave between the two ramps on between 118 and Fontaine. We may have to look at reconfiguring how those work. And possibly widen that bridge to accommodate a weave lane that goes across the bridge. So we can get that merge to work between those two interchanges. So that's why we're extending it. We're not really going to look at Fontaine again as part of this. We're just looking at the bypass configuration and how those ramps would work and how we can make those ramps function better. Any questions about that?
The note that you have here, the asterisks. Is that going to be submitted as part of?
Chuck, did you hear the question, the asterisk at the bottom of your slide that says the alternative solution at Barracks Road?
Develop previous pipeline study could be submitted around. Oh, that might have been carryover from another slide. I pulled this slide deck and reformatted it, and that might have been carried over. Do you remember, Sandy, what that was for?
Yeah, we included that note because we had talked about how there might be a desire to go back and revisit the Barracks Road project if it is not competitive enough route. And what we had discussed is we wanted to clarify why we weren't considering that as a potential pipeline process. That's because there was an alternative that was identified as part of the pipeline project that had already been completed that could be resubmitted in a future round if the application is not successful.
I can go back. Hold on.
No other questions on that, or were you gonna explain something? All right, I think we're good, Chuck. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Very good. That will take us to number 6, staff updates and meeting schedule. Christine?
Yep, the first one is a Safe Streets and Roads for All update, and that is Gorion and Sarah online reporting in from the governor's transportation conference, not housing. So Gorion.
Thank you, Christine. Just want to be very brief about this. Since our last meeting in August, we conducted 6 site visits in each one jurisdiction of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, 2 from which was in City of Charlottesville and Albemarle County. I have to say that that was not one location, but multiple locations that were identified through the high injury network. Currently, we're working on prioritizing solutions, and soon, or from November 11th to November 23rd, we'll be going out to the public for round 2 of engagement, where we're going to be asking feedback from the public. That's all I have. Just want to mention, actually, I forgot one thing. We had our 4th working group member meeting last week, and just want to specify that meeting is not a public meeting and is only for stakeholders that were identified for the project. In December, I'm planning to provide a formal presentation on this topic. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Gorion? All right.
Sarah, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yes, I was gonna just make a comment saying we will be having public engagement events throughout the county and the city. So just stay on the lookout and engage with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Sorry, December meeting, sorry, that was us realizing we were not recording this, that we thought Ruth recorded it. Oh, no, it's recorded. It's on there. Sorry for that interruption. We just were at a panic moment that we didn't hit record.
I can't see it on the screen.
That's right. It's showing you because I'm the host. Brilliant.
So sorry.
The other update is the December meeting time. We had a discussion in our previous meeting about converting the December meeting to an all virtual meeting where all participants would be virtual, no in person. And we were in a holding pattern to make sure no additional changes were happening to the Albemarle Board of Supervisors. On here, it says December 17th. Since your board is not meeting on the 18th, if you guys want to hold our normal Wednesday, the 18th, we could do that. It would just have to be an abbreviated 4:30 to 6 instead of 4 to 6, because we have a regional housing partnership backing up to that 4 o'clock. So if it works for everybody's calendars, Wednesday, December 18th, 4:30 to 6 o'clock, then we will send out a calendar invite with the all virtual link.
Any objection?
Either one is fine.
Great, we will send that out.
All right, that's all.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to roundtable updates. I'll jump online here. Mr. Condor, the updates from CTEC.
No, not at this time.
Up here is Mitch, somebody that we would be calling?
Yes, that's DRPT.
That's who?
DRPT.
Oh, instead of. Mitch, Mr. Hubert, I'm sorry, I got you confused with another name written down here.
Brand new change.
All good. No, no new updates from us.
All right, thank you, and is that it up there? So we'll go to the room, Mr. Esky.
Yeah, Josh's side, we are happy to report that the 3 studies we've been working on are all nearing completion. For the rollout, the rural transit needs assessment, we actually presented that to the RTAC. And then we're gonna do the presentation, Mike Murphy's gonna present it along with the consultant. At the Regional Transit Partnership meeting in the December 12th. So you'll probably get lots of opportunities to hear all of these reports. The next one is the mobility on demand, which is the microtransit study. I think that's going to provoke some interesting conversation just about that technology and how it can be used in service. We're looking at it around ADA service, also maybe some localized services in the counties, in some of the rural areas. But there's lots to unpack there. And the third is the bus electrification study. That probably won't really roll out until probably after the first of the calendar year, so like January, maybe, something like that. So we'll get on the agenda for some of these committees at that point for that study. And we're going to attend the Champaign-Urbana hydrogen fuel study field trip, which is happening tomorrow, right?
Right, bright and early.
Most times.
So our study looked at electrification. Because we did an alternative study before my time on the fuels, and they said stay with electrification. But always like to see what the hydrogen folks do as well. Anyway, that's it from John.
Great, thank you. Sandy, anything in addition over there?
I'll defer to Ms. Walden.
All right, we'll come get Stacy here in a sec. And Jessica, anything from the county?
The Free Bridge Lane Promenade pilot program will kick off Friday, the November 1st at 10 a.m. with the gates closing event.
Closing it, I love it. Yep. Ben?
Yeah, so we have some updates from the city. Sort of the big headlines is that we had a terrible tragedy in our city. We had someone hit by a car as they were crossing at a crosswalk over on Elliott Avenue, back on October 3rd. We've had deaths and pedestrian fatalities in the city before, and I really have not seen a reaction both from the community at large and also city staff to this one. It's been kind of an amazing month for me, working and just seeing how the changes happened. Within a week of that incident, we had already identified an immediate solution to put on the ground in terms of quick fills, making it so that our bike lanes were making the travel lanes a little bit more narrow to slow down speeds, provided some protection for bicyclists and a little bit of an area for people who are pedestrians waiting to figure out when a safe place is to jump in the traffic. We had also announced pretty soon thereafter, within that first week, that we are going to be looking at reducing speed limits across the city. So taking a big systematic look at how speed is functioning on our neighborhood streets and figuring out what to do about it. That also means we have to look at the traffic calm, which brings a whole different set of questions for us to address. And as we were sort of sitting down as staff, strategically thinking through how do you deal with issues like this? How do we meet the goals that city council has set before us in our comp plan, in our strategic framework? We realized we have a lot of plans, we have a lot of lists, they don't all talk to each other, they don't all start to talk to our standards. It's time for us to start thinking about a comprehensive plan in the city. So as you can imagine, I've been pretty busy the past few weeks trying to wrap my head around how to do those sort of big things. In the meantime, we are still doing other stuff. We have other updates as well. All right, so we are currently working through some of those questions of traffic calming with the fire department. We have a Safe Streets for All supplemental grant that we're waiting to hear back on. If we get that funding, we have a lot more funding to do sort of traffic calming studies and figure out what works on our streets. But we want to get out ahead of that. We know we're going to have to talk about traffic calming, whether federal money comes or it doesn't. And we want to make sure that our fire department and our other large vehicle operators in the city are giving us the feedback that they need so that they can continue to give us the services that they provide. We're looking at speed limits. We are currently wrapping up our first batch of Tier 1 sidewalk designs. Once we get the cost estimates for those, we're going to be handing those off to Public Works. And that frees up my bike tech coordinator to start looking at the West Main restriping project, which will look at putting in protected bike lanes on West Main Street. Our Safe Routes to School program is currently moving some of our paint and plastic projects that we've done in recent years into being more permanent projects. We just finished up one on Azalea Drive. It's a new sidewalk, a new bus stop, new bus bench, a new ADA accessible bus path. We are working with VDOT on a road diet on Fifth Street. Chuck mentioned that a little bit earlier of how our study looking at a road diet going southbound on Fifth Street is going to interact with some of the planning work that VDOT is planning, which is going to be helpful because we know long term that Fifth Street station intersection is going to cause us a lot of problems if we're trying to constrain some of the capacity there. We are working with the county on some of the work that needs to go into setting up the regional transit authority. So expect to hear more about that in a month or two. And the city is also currently working on sort of behind the scenes steps of doing a pilot project around doing e-bike subsidies. We're looking at doing any form of a voucher instead of a rebate. So you get basically a coupon. And we're looking at doing it through the lottery system, looking to start that out in the year. So currently working through some issues of legal and procurement and making sure we have all the ducks in a row so we do that well. So a lot of exciting things in the city these days. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Stacy?
Yeah, a couple of construction updates. On the hydraulic project, the road work on hydraulic itself will be completed in November. And we're working now on the ped bridge. The drill shafts for the bridge piers are completed on both sides of the road, and the center will be completed shortly. Kind of next to come in the area is the Albemarle bundle of improvements, 5 improvements. That one's been awarded, design phase is underway, and then the first project that will get going is the 240-250-680 roundabout in Crozet. And then finally, Fontaine, we continue to work with our central office pretty actively at this point on funding the deficits on both the interchange portion of that bundle, which is how we intend to deliver those projects, and the city's portion. Plus the gap in between. So that's looking favorable. We still need to have approval of the funding, additional funding to be from those projects. But the project team has begun the steps toward advertising that bundle as a design build, like their risk assessment meeting. It's one of the steps along the way this Friday.
Great.
Can you remind us of the approximate end time for the ped bridge over 29?
I don't know if I know off the top of my head, but I can let you know.
Does anyone else remember?
No.
Thanks.
It's Clyde that got most of that.
It's nice to see it happening and everything I go up there. I don't go to that often, but every time I'm like, oh, there's the
Yeah. I'll see if I can find it while we're talking. I'll put it in.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the updates. We have additional matters from the public. Are there additional comments that wish to be made this evening?
Oh, anybody-
Close additional matters from the public.
Will you just confirm that no one online, does anyone online like to give a public comment? Thank you, just wanted to be sure.
And with that, and if there is no objection, then we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.